Hello, Future Todd here. Welcome to this video on the PanottiServer setup. We have a few updates that I want to cover and start here, and then we'll go to the rest of the video, which will still have all the pertinent information you need to understand the Panotti The first thing you need to understand is that you can go to our webpage, panotti.io, P-A-N-O-T-T-I.io, to get to our homepage and access the server information. I would like to point out that under the Contact Us on our homepage, there's the Join the Discord community. This is for sure the best way to get updates, announcements, and support. So please join the Discord community. Also, we have the Docs section, which will have all the information, including the server documentation that we'll go through today. The main difference I wanted to show back on the homepage, if you go to our GitHub server here, you'll see that there's now a much simpler installation path where you just need to copy this quick setup script. This will set up Homebrew, Docker, and Ollama automatically, and then set up the server. This is by far the easiest way to do this. There are also setup scripts that are mentioned in the later video for running it locally, and I say setup.py is that script later in the video, but that's actually local_setup.py, and there's also a docker_setup.py that are more detailed setup scripts for those two installs. It's really your responsibility to understand what's being installed and how it's being installed, to understand how it's changing your machine. We try to make this as simple as possible for a normal user, but if you're more of a power user, please do look into what's being set up on your machine before you go forward, and you should do that regardless. So without further ado, on with the rest of the video. Hello everybody. This video will be about the detailed setup and features of the Panotti server. The best place to start is to go to our website at panotti.io, P-A-N-O-T-T-I.io. This is where you'll get the links to download the desktop app, which I assume you've already installed in this video, and there's another video going into that detail. But what we're going to do is go to the GitHub repository and download the open source server. So you can do that by clicking this link, and it'll take you here, and this is what the page looks like. So the first thing we want to do is we want to clone the repository. So usually we go here, get SSH, and we hit copy that. And then we want to cd into the directory of your choice. And then do git clone, paste that in, and then you can optionally add another directory here to clone it into. If you just hit enter, it'll go into PanottiServer, but I'm going to put it into a directory. And then hit return. And this clones it into the directory of your choice. And so if I go into that new folder, and I listed the files that should look like this. So the next thing you need to do is just run the setup script. So if I just go /scripts /setup.py, so /scripts/setup.py, and hit return, this will start taking you into the setup script. And you're asked if you want to proceed. The first note here is that if you're going to customize this or create your plugins or whatnot, you might want to fork this code and then rerun this process. So it's really highly advised if you're that way inclined to do that from the start. But in our case, we're just going to proceed with the default setup. So the first question is, do we want to run meeting notes locally on a machine? And we do, so that's the default setup. So we're going to say yes here. And because our meeting notes use a local language model to be created, we need to set up Ollama. So Ollama can be found by going to this link here. If we just put that here. Oops. And then you get this download. The home page looks like this. Just go to download macOS and download for macOS. I've already installed it. If you want to see what models are available, you can click on models. You can see the different models. We support many of these. By default, we are installing Llama 3.1 8 billion parameter model, but you can install and run whatever model that suits your machine. So once you download and install the Llama, then you can continue with the setup. So we'll say, yes, we have installed that. So it says, do you want to use this default model? I'm going to say yes. And it's going to pull down the default model. On mine, it went really fast because it's already installed. The next thing it's going to do is start checking for other dependencies. So Homebrew is a MacOS package manager. So it checked if I had that installed. If not, it'll install it. It'll also install dependencies through Homebrew. So Terminal Notifier allows you to get notifications when a recording is complete. FFmpeg is a audio processing library, and PyEnv is a Python version management package. It's going to check your Python version and make sure that's installed correctly. It's going to check that you have Rust, which is needed for audio processing. And then finally, Poetry. It'll check if that's installed. Poetry is a Python package manager. Next, it's going to ask, do you want to set up a virtual environment? We're going to say yes. So it's going to create a virtual environment and then start installing all the dependencies using Poetry. Then it's going to ask you if you want to download the Whisper model. So this is needed for local audio transcription. So you say yes here. It's going to download the Whisper model. This might take a minute or two, but it's usually pretty quick. So there, it's done. Next, it's going to ask you want to make SSL certificates, and you want to say yes to that. That's going to create SSL certificates and to allow the server to run on HTTPS with self-signed certificates. Next, it's going to check if you have Node installed, and it's going to install the Next.js front-end application. So this is a front end for the server to allow you to easily manage configuration, which I'll show you in a minute. And then the next thing you want to do is it's going to ask if you want to create an end file from the example. Say yes. And then here it's going to ask you two pieces of information. Enter your API key. So if you have Panotti already set up, you go to the callbacks and you hit edit. Whatever API key you put here, in my case, I put query123. Again, advise you use a better API key. I'm going to copy that and paste that here to make sure that the front end and back end sync up. And then the recordings directory you can find in your settings, and it's this path right here. So it's case sensitive. So if I go to users, Todd documents / Panotti, and hit return. And then the next thing is going to ask you if you want to set up all the plugin configuration files, and the answer there is yes again. And that's it. So you're pretty much set up, ready to go. You start the servers by running this command. You can also use Docker compose up, and that will launch create Docker containers and be able to launch the server and the admin server using Docker. So that might be handy for other people. For some people, there is an Llama service that you can launch, but I highly recommend not using that within a container, as the quality seems to be really poor and the resources management is difficult to manage. So really you just want to run the API server and the admin server using Docker, which is what the default is if you use Docker. So another thing to note here, this is the website for the admin URL once you start the servers, and here is the default password for that. So we're going to come back to this in a second after we start the service. So let's just start the servers, running this /start_servers.sh. And what you're looking for here is application startup complete. You're looking for all of these plugins to be loaded and no failed plugins. So that's a good sign that everything's set up fine. So now both servers are up and running, the API server and the front end. So we're going to actually go to this front end, and we're going to launch that now. Return. So this is where you get the login, and we're going to go back here and grab this password. The default password is this one, case sensitive. We're going to put that in here, and then you're going to be asked to change your password. So you put your current one in, you're going to put a new one in, that's hopefully a strong one of your choosing. And then you hit change password. And then you should be to this page. So this just has a little notification whether the backend server is up, which might be handy. It also has the information on how to get in touch and join our Discord community. We'll go through that later. But the main thing here is that the settings option here, which has all the settings on the server. So what this allows you to do is change all the different variables on the server and also within the plugins and what plugins are on or off. So first off, we have the environment variable. So this is the API key that you set up in the setup process. So if you change this on the front end, you have to change it here as well. You can change log levels, ports, log retention days, or you can change the recording directory. And then it's got this nice feature where you can turn on directory sync and enable this. And then it has this kind of JSON array of source and destination. And what this will do is it'll take anything in the source directory and automatically watch for new files and then copy it to anything in the destination directory. So this will look for new meeting notes that are created and then automatically copy the markdown files that come out of those meeting notes over to another folder. In my case, I use Obsidian, which is a markdown knowledge management tool. So it's really nice to be able to have those automatically copy into my Obsidian directory. So that's what that is. If you save any changes to the environment folder, you need to kill the server. So you hit Control C to stop running the server, and then so you can just do that Control C, and it'll just go back to here. And then what you actually have to do is close that and create a new terminal to make sure that everything's loaded correctly. Change the directory back into your directory, your server directory, and then you can just run the /start servers again, and then you're kind of back to the same spot you were at before, with the new environment variables loaded. So that's environment variables. Plugins settings will actually be kind of updated in real time, so to speak, or at least every time the audio is processed. So these you don't need to do that reboot restart mechanism. So let's just give an overview before I go into detail of each plugin. So how the flow works. So the first thing is, so once you you start a recording, that's going to do a start recording, but it's really all the action happens right now in the end recording. That's going to send an end recording call back to this endpoint here. And then that's going to trigger a whole workflow process through these plugins. So the first thing that happens is it does noise reduction, and that's where it cancels out kind of some of the mic bleed from the system audio to the microphone audio, and cancels that out to make sure that we're not like double transcribing anything. Then the next thing that's called is the audio transcription plugin, and that's going to take that cleaned up audio for both the microphone and system audio, transcribe each of those independently, and then create one merged transcription file. So that might be useful for somebody just to have the transcription in and of itself. But then that merged transcription file is then going to be sent over to the meeting notes plugin, which will then actually call a large language model on the back end, in our case, Olama language model, to take that transcription and create sort of a detailed meeting notes out of them. Next up is the desktop notifier will be called, and that'll give you a little pop-up telling you that the meeting notes are available. And then there's a cleanup files plugin that's called, that cleans up all the files apart from the meeting notes ones, just so you don't have a lot of files hanging around that could get potentially large over time. The example plugin is just one for anybody who wants to make their own plugin. It just gives you kind of an example kind of template for doing that, which is why it's disabled. You also note that there's a Meeting Notes remote plugin. So by default, we support the local Meeting Notes, which is kind of one of the big features of the Panotti system, is that you can both record and create Meeting Notes completely locally for privacy reasons. All the information stays on your computer. But we also have the option to be able to call remote large language models, either OpenAI models, Anthropic models, or Google models, using the remote plugin. So if your machine locally isn't fast enough or powerful enough to do this locally, or you don't want to do that, you can actually call third-party suppliers for the language models. However, obviously you're sending your data off-site, so you need to understand whatever risks are involved with that. It's calling their APIs in the backend. So you can kind of check either one of these. You check one, or you can actually do both if you wanted two sets of transcriptions to be created. But usually you choose one or the other of these, and you can experiment with how you want to do that. Really kind of the whole point of this is that you can control how you want your audio to be processed. You can create your own plugins for this. So it's really up to you how you do it. So that's the overview of all the plugins. So we're going to go into the settings quick. So the audio transcription plugin, it's going to save the data transcriptions local. The base model, this is the Whisper model, is base.en. So this is an English language model. You can probably play around with other models. Again, this is something you might need to change or look up how to install yourself. There's a cleanup transcript option, which is by default true. And what this does is it kind of removes the ums and ahs from the final transcription. This is useful just not only to clean up all those kind of like ums and ahs and kind of repeating words, but also it'll be less data to send over to the large language model, which could help when we're processing. Clean up files. So this is just going to look at whatever directories here. So by default, it's going to look through the entire data directory. It's going to look for anything for that particular event kind of workflow, and it's going to delete everything in the data directory and subdirectories that start with the ID tag for the recording. You can have exclude directories here. But by default, it excludes the actual meeting notes that are created through the local and remote Meeting Notes plugin. So the idea here is that you at least are left with those meeting notes, but you could have everything being cleaned up if you want. That's up to you to decide. And there's a delay on how long it waits before it cleans up. So that's what that delay is. Desktop Notifier. So Desktop Notifier is a plugin that does gives you a notification when it's complete. And then you have this toggle to actually open the note. So it'll actually notify it's complete, and then it'll actually open the note. Again, that's up to you how you want to use that. Example, skip because it's not relevant. Meeting Notes local. So this has the URLs to the different OLAMA running locally. It's got the model name that you're using, the context window size, and the timeout. So that's the local Meeting Notes. And Meeting Notes Remote is the plugin that allows you to call external providers. So by default, we have Anthropic, but this could be Anthropic, OpenAI, or Google, all lowercase. So you'll choose one of them, and then you have to fill out the corresponding API key for whichever model you're running and fill in the model name you want to run it against. So I'll leave that up to you to Google and figure out. It's a pretty common pattern creating API keys in these providers to call their APIs. Of course, you're on the hook for any costs associated with that. So just bear that in mind if you're going to use the remote Meeting Notes. And then finally, noise reduction. It's going to clean up that audio. I highly recommend just not playing around with any of these settings unless you actually know what you're doing with them. So I would just probably leave this as is, but feel free to experiment. It's your choice. So that's all the different plugins. You can enable or disable things by clicking on them. So if I wanted to enable Meeting Notes Remote, it'll save changes, but there's a warning here that it's going to restart the server. So if you're actually processing something like currently, then it might cut off that processing. So you have to, if you make any changes, then you have to take that risk. But I can then save this, and now that'll be enabled, and I can disable this one, for instance, if that's how I want to go. Again, the server will be restarted in the back end. So you have to note that if you're going to make these changes. And that's about it from a settings perspective. So I'm just going to basically just run through a quick example. So I have the servers running. This shows the logs from both the API server and the admin front end server. I'll show you the log directory in a second here. So here, when you run, it sets up this data folder. This is where all your data is going to be stored. And it's going to populate these folders when there's a new session running. There's also this logs here, so you can actually look at and inspect the logs, look for errors or anything. Particularly useful if you're going to be playing around with plugin development, or you're trying to debug an issue. This is probably where you want to look and search for either error or a warning. So let's give this a try here. So I've got my front end configured. Again, these API keys should match, and the recording directory should match. So I can just go ahead and record something here. I'm going to use my talking to Thomas Edison as my example. So I'm going to hit record, say, it's going to ask me for granting access to my folder here. Now it's started recording. Hi, Thomas. How are you doing? What do you have to say to us today?
The first words I spoke in the original phonograph. A little piece of practical poetry. Mary had a little lamb, its fleece was white as snow, and everywhere that Mary went, the lamb was sure to go.
Well, that's great, Thomas. We'll catch you next week to talk about your lamb issue, and we can meet up with Mary if that sounds good. Thanks a lot. Bye. So we stop our recording, and as you'll be able to see, it's already starting to process that information on the server backend, doing the cleaning and transcription and meeting notes generation locally. So as you can see here, it actually created them pretty quickly. And here's a meeting note that was created. Obviously, this is the markdown format, which is why it's in this format. But you can also actually view it in a markdown application as well. So, for instance, I'm going to use a program called Macdown to look at the same file here. And as you can see, it allows you to view the markdown here, and it obviously caught the action items to discuss the lamb issue and whatnot, and you can actually edit it here. So this information on meeting notes and attendees and things like that might not be correct just using the regular record button. So you might have to change these yourself. If you use the Google plugin, all of this metadata will be sent in, and it'll be populated for you, which is a nice reason to use the Google plugin. So yeah, that's pretty much the whole of the server setup. If you have any questions, go to our website at panotti.io. That's PANOTTI.io. You'll get links to download the front end, go to the GitHub. You'll also be able to go to the documentation if you have any questions there, and then of course contacting us. So this is where you can reach us. It's highly recommended that you join our Discord community to get announcements and support. That's probably the best place to go if you get stuck, and be happy to help you there. So that's about it. I hope you guys enjoy it, and I can't wait to see how you guys use it. Please do let us know. Thank you very much.